Welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh Strong is here with me. There were lots of sports games played over the weekend, Josh. And because, at least at the highest level of sports, there are winners and losers and not participation trophies for 7th place, we had teams that won the weekend. We had teams that lost the weekend. That's what we're going to do now. Would you like to start with the veggies or with the dessert? The good news or the bad news?
Let's start with the veggies first. I'm a get the worst out of the way, save the best for last kind of guy.
I'm right there with you. That's why you always eat dessert at the end, and why you eat the really good pizza crust last. So let's start with there. Let's start with the veggies. Who's your loser from the weekend?
The Jacksonville Jaguars.
Tell me why.
Courtesy of the New York Jets. So we'll start specifically with the Jaguars, who lost 27-24 to the Vikings in overtime in a game they led 9-0, which is by no means an insurmountable lead, but I felt like it was still noteworthy.
Mm-hmm.
They had 10 penalties, 2 lost fumbles, 2 interceptions, and a safety.
Mm.
It was not a particularly pretty performance.
Mm.
But there was this moment in time where the Jets were beating the Raiders, and all of a sudden the Jaguars had hope of getting Trevor Lawrence. Then the Jets did something that has not been done in the previous 251 similar situations ESPN has data on, which is this. I don't know if you've seen this stat, but it's pretty mind-boggling. Adam Schefter tweeted it out. So since they've started tracking this data, there are 251 previous plays heading into this week in the final 15 seconds where a team was winning by 4 to 6 points, and the other team had to go at least 40 yards. That's right. So the situation that the Jets found themselves in terms of making decisions defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Never has a team sent more than 5 pass rushers in that scenario. So this is basically Hail Marys.
Yep.
The Jets sent 7 players to go after Derek Carr. So, of course, you get one-on-one coverage with 0 safety help.
Yep.
It wasn't even a Hail Mary. I was getting frustrated with people that were calling it a Hail Mary. That was just one-on-one coverage.
Just pass play.
Right. It's just a go route, and it was Henry Ruggs, right?
Yep.
You can't guard Henry Ruggs one-on-one. I mean, come on now. Especially if you're the Jets. It was just gross negligence that can only really be described as trying to lose.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as blatant as I've ever seen it in any sport. And we're talking about the process Sixers here. And I think this might be more blatant. So my loser is the Jaguars because the Jets decided to do that and lost a game that they very easily could have won and probably should have.
Is there any way to actually get onto them for tanking, right? Because I mean, in term other than finding recordings saying, you know what, this season we're going to go 0-16. This season,
Right.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to get it done. We're going to go 0-16. We're going to get Trevor Lawrence. Unless you find that, this is pretty close to evidence, right? I mean, in terms, and maybe it's circumstantial. It's evidence that probably wouldn't hold up in court, right?
Right.
But which I guess we can get that serious about tanking sanctions, but. Right, and then if you take their number 1 overall pick away from them as a result, then people are really up in arms. But right, if we're really going to be serious about not allowing tanking, you at least have to do something to make the Jets at least a little scared the rest of the season, right? Because you're exactly right. You have 4 guys rushing, and you put 7 guys in the end zone for the Hail Mary. That's how you defend a Hail Mary. That's why Hail Marys never work. Right? Because you've got, how many offensive linemen are there? 5, right? There are 5 offensive linemen. There's a quarterback. So that means that your receivers are 5-on-7. That's why Hail Marys never work, because DeAndre Hopkins has to catch it over 4 different guys. And by the time the ball actually gets to the end zone, everybody knows roughly where it's going to land. So it's really 5 versus 7. And the defense usually wins that. That's why you run the play. Right? That's why you defend it the way that you do, because it's just ridiculously favored in the defensive guy's possession. You could rush one guy if you wanted to, right? I mean, you could.
Right.
I mean, we got some fast defensive ends nowadays. Just tell them to turn and run towards the end zone, right? They would probably get there before a Hail Mary from the 50-yard line actually gets to the end zone.
It's just put him on the end zone. Just have one guy at the line of scrimmage and put everybody else on the end zone to start with.
Right. It's just not that difficult to guard a Hail Mary, and if you're unless you're trying to tank, then there are easy ways to make it obvious that you weren't really trying to guard. You weren't really trying to defend the Hail Mary, because you should never be that wide open at the end of a game like that.
No.
Never. Not only was he just wide open, he just like caught it and ran into the end zone, right? Like it was, like you said, it was just a normal pass route, and there was a blip in defensive coverage, a safety, right. Laid down on the job kind of thing. And it was the last play of the game. Yeah, I mean, of course, the 0-11 Jets, the only thing that could possibly happen good for them, 0-12 now, the only thing that needs to happen now is that they get Trevor Lawrence. So I get it, but if we're really going to say that we're not allowed to tank here in American sports, you got to do something about this, because that was, like you said, about as close to obvious and indisputable as you can get without saying we're going to go lose this game on purpose and putting our third string everything out on the football field.
But it's also something that's easy enough to explain away, is all we wanted to get to,
right.
You can just throw out an explanation.
Right.
Even though this has never happened since ESPN started tracking this data. But
also, shouts to ESPN data, like the data that they have, the things they keep track of is just, it's almost laugh out loud funny. Like you keep track of that so that this one time you can say that once and people talk
right.
about it on shows like this, and it's worth it. My loser this weekend is college basketball fans, because we were supposed to get to see Gonzaga and Baylor play, and 1 and 2 have played before. That's not a historical thing, but very rarely do 1 and 2 play in which 1 and 2 were so clearly the two best teams in the sport, right? It's Gonzaga. I think it's fair to keep Baylor on, it might be 1 and 2 in that tier, but I feel like Baylor right now has earned at least to be in the conversation of that top tier in the sport, along
Absolutely.
with Gonzaga. Even if you feel like Gonzaga is the better basketball team, which I think right now is largely a consensus, but they're close enough to be on that same tier. Nobody else is particularly close. They're a good basketball team, but Iowa doesn't have the defense to be considered in that conversation. Illinois loses to Baylor. They sort of Baylor sort of runs away down the stretch. Very rarely does this happen where the context is these are clearly the two best teams in the sport. These are, for more reasons than one, these are two teams that have come out playing at a very, very high level. And for it to not happen, it was funny. It never crossed my mind that this game would get canceled. Never crossed my mind, which was naive of me, because of course there was a chance it would get canceled. It never crossed my mind. But the losers, college basketball fans are losers this weekend because they didn't get to see this game, and also just the way it got canceled. I mean, we were minutes away from it. We weren't a day. We weren't 5 hours. We were minutes away, maybe a little over an hour away from this game tipping off, and then you get word it's been canceled. And I was a sad boy in the middle of the day on Saturday, because I'd been looking forward to that game all week, and we just didn't get it. I was sad.
Which puts you in this weird position where they're going to try and reschedule the game, but it's not like you could have found a way to have Baylor swap that game out and play somebody else really good right then and there, because you knew 2 days in advance.
Right.
It was exactly like you said. That was the other disappointing part, is immediately, right when you're going into warm-ups and the pregame process is starting.
Right.
Or right before, during, I don't know the specific timetable, but
yeah.
there was no readjusting to do. It's hopefully these two teams get to play at some point.
Yeah.
And they're going to try their best, but there are no guarantees. And my initial reaction was exactly sort of what you led with there, which was, yeah, what we've seen. The question, and we'll get to this in our next segment, is there are two teams, and then there's everybody else. Is anybody else going to be able to get to that top tier? So there's only so much we can learn about these two teams aside from them playing each other, because I think they're going to be the two best teams in the country at least most of the season, if not from start to finish. Mm-hmm. So we were going to learn something really interesting here. Hopefully it still happens. It's also a really interesting contrast of roster makeup. The only benefit I can see to try and make you a little bit happier, this might mean Jalen Suggs is a little bit healthier, get some of his rhythm back, coming back from that injury if it's later. Yep. So it might make the game a little bit better. That's my piece of optimism.
I appreciate that optimism. I was sad. I was. And we'll get to Villanova and Texas in the next segment, but Villanova and Texas made up for it. That was a really, really fun basketball game, but it was, these are the top four teams in KenPom entering the weekend were going to play this weekend, each other. And so it wasn't, of course, what I was hoping that it was going to be. And there was just no way in my head that the game wasn't going to be awesome. It was going to be a close game that that was just a really high level of basketball the entire time. So I was really upset about it. But let's talk about some happier things. Who's your winner?
My winner is Indiana.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, it is.
And Tom Allen. They beat Wisconsin. Good for them. Obviously, another quality win. There is no disputing what they've done this season. They do it without Michael Penix Jr., which was the big question. Who knows how good they really are without him, but it's getting harder to just
good enough to beat Wisconsin on the road.
Right, exactly. That this is clearly the second best team in the Big Ten. Who knows what that means, but they're having a phenomenal season. That defense is excellent. It's not just about Michael Penix, although he's very important to them. This is just a really good team that's having a season for the ages. But more specifically, this is just the kind of team that makes me feel good about college sports. And that doesn't happen very often these days with all of the negative stuff going on.
Yep.
Those players love Tom Allen. I have never seen anything like this before. And he's doing his post-game interview. He's got guys. The one dude comes up and says, "Hey, recruits, come play for this man." The other dude comes up and says, "Best coach in the country." This is what it's all about. This is what college sports are supposed to be. Listening to him talk, I listened to a podcast he was on. I am just immensely impressed with the way he carries himself, the way he runs this program. Mm-hmm. It just makes me feel good that you can have success doing things the right way, because it certainly seems like that's what's happening. And at the very least, those players feel valued and loved, and that is not always the case in this world where they're getting taken advantage of and racial tension. There's a lot going on right now. But those players love that man, and that's a testament to what he has done and the way he's approached this thing. And now it's breeding success on the field.
Indiana is a football school.
Yeah, they are.
But no, you're right, and it's on a more on-field note. Winning this game means that it just means a little bit more about what Indiana is as a program, more than right. Instead of Indiana just being a team that has stumbled upon a really good quarterback and is getting good years because of it. You don't have a good coach. You don't have a good program. You don't have a good culture. You don't have a good throw whatever else you want to in there and find a way to win against a top 20 team on the road. You just don't. That doesn't happen. And to put it into context, I mean, right, there's a difference between Notre Dame and Wisconsin, indisputably. But Indiana just went and did something that Clemson was not able to do. And that's what I said right after the game. That's not to say that Dabo Swinney hasn't created a good culture there and that Dabo Swinney doesn't have his players bought in and all of those things that I just said. You can still lose this game and have those things, but you never win this game and don't have those things. because it's really easy to lay down and not be bought in anymore when your quarterback goes down. Because we talked about this last week. It's hard to believe that Indiana is the same team. And while they're not the same team, right? I mean, the final score of this game was 12-6. But it's hard to win a game 12-6 when you're not bought into what you're doing and you're not really fighting for everything that you're fighting for, despite having lost your quarterback. That was the biggest thing for me here, is that it's not just we have a good football team led by a really good quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. We have a good program now. We have a coach that, like you said, everyone likes. We have a coach that everyone's bought into. And we have a coach that guys will go out on the field and play really hard for, even when it's a game that you're playing a top 20 team on the road, that you have to go and play without your starting quarterback. Those things are just as important as the fact that you win this football game, right? And then there are other things to look at. The fact that, you have a sophomore quarterback in Jack Tuttle that you think, in theory at least, I mean, going and doing what he did certainly wasn't easy, right? You won this game 14-6, not 12-6. So he wasn't blowing anybody away, of course, but it also suggests that you have more good things coming down the line, and that this is something that can be sustainable. Michael Penix Jr. is a sophomore too, but there's at least depth there, and that you're doing more things right than you just happen to get a guy that is really talented. Because having a guy step in and being able to be your starting quarterback like that, when necessity calls for it, is also impressive. So I learned a lot about the Indiana program, not just not just the 22 guys that were on the field for Indiana yesterday or 2 days ago.
Absolutely.
I didn't think too hard about this. My winner is Coastal Carolina, and they're my winner because, right, it's just different for a program that doesn't have seasons like this. Coastal Carolina doesn't do this. And that's not a shot at Coastal Carolina in any sense of the word, right? That's not a shot at them at all. The point being is that I'm a really big fan of teams that very rarely have dream seasons, doing the things they need to do to really execute on that dream season. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And the last 3 years, 3-9, 5-7, 5-7. This just doesn't happen for Coastal Carolina. It just doesn't. And to see them not only, and they're also the winner because, right, they win this game and they're still not even going to sniff the college football playoff. It's just not going to happen. BYU gets close. I guess BYU has more to gain from this, and yep. Coastal Carolina has, I guess, not more to lose, but this is a season that, if there's a 0 in that loss column at the end of this season, this is a season that Coastal remembers forever, and this will still be a season, even if they had lost to BYU. But its magic, its specialness, undoubtedly just is more established if there's a 0 in that loss column. And to go and do this against a BYU team that was favored, to go and do this against a BYU team that has a quarterback like Zach Wilson, right, they won the football game. They're still undefeated. They're now 11th in the country. All of those things are why they're winners. But also, this is just a season that doesn't come around all that often for a team like Coastal Carolina. And to see them continue that on short notice against a team like BYU and just continue the magic was cool. So I didn't think too hard about this one. Coastal is certainly a winner of the weekend for more reasons than just the fact that they managed to beat a top 15 team in BYU on Saturday.
No argument with any of that. Yeah, it's special. They're just living in the moment. It's fun to watch. Also want to mention real quick before we go to break, the New York Jets have fired defensive coordinator Greg Williams.
How about that? How about them apples? But here we go. Ready? Here's. Are you ready for this? I'm about to spit some knowledge. They were already going to fire this guy, right? So you tell them, listen, we're going to fire you, but you're going to go do this thing that helps us tank, but we're going to fire you so the optics look like we fired this guy after an indefensible mistake, right? So now any tanking questions, you can just go to, we just fired the defensive coordinator.
Right. Oh,
we're clearly trying to improve. We clearly want to win football games. Somebody who makes decisions like that isn't allowed to be on the coaching staff of our football team. It's genius. 1,000 IQ. Listen, we're playing checkers and the Jets are playing chess over there at 0-12. Still playing chess, even at 0-12. Coming up next, we're going to talk college basketball, Texas, Villanova, some other things. We'll do that next. 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.